Maximize Business Value podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition their business on their terms. Our mission was born from the lessons we've learned from over 100 business transactions, which fuels our desire to share our experiences and wisdom so you can succeed. Now here's your host, CEO of Mastery Partners, Tom Bronson.
Hi, this is Tom Bronson, and welcome to Maximize Business Value, a podcast for business owners who are passionate about building long-term sustainable value in their businesses. This episode kicks off a series on the value of assessment tools for any organization. Now, we've all heard about various assessments like DISC and Culture Index, Predictive Index, Strength Finders, and others. And the chances are pretty good that you've had some exposure to one or more of these assessments during your career. This series explores the best ways to use these assessments to improve your business. In the coming weeks, we'll dedicate time to each of 5 assessment tools, but today we're starting with an overview. So in this episode, I'd like to welcome our guest, Dr. Ginny Gray, an organizational psychologist who helps businesses leverage their talent. Now, I met Ginny through Business Navigators, the servant leadership organization in Dallas we've talked about before. Dr. Gray is a highly accomplished, results-oriented talent management, organizational development executive. How do you like that? That's a mouthful. With extensive experience in executive assessment, development, and onboarding, high potential employees, identification, learning and development, leadership development, performance management, and succession planning. Now, she's driven cultural transformations, instituted change management practices, and leveraged metrics for measuring impact. And she's used many of the tools that we'll be talking about today and in the coming weeks. So who better to talk about the value of assessments and how to use them to improve your business? So welcome to Maximize Business Value, Ginny. Tell us a little bit about your business.
Thank you, Tom. What a nice introduction. I appreciate that. And thanks for having me on your podcast. Yeah, I'm in the business of everything about talent. So I've been branding my business as Minding Talent, and as a way to remind companies that no matter how well organized you are or structured you are, it will only perform as good as the employee capabilities that you have today. So it's critical to understand the current capacity of your individuals and future ability for them to perform.
And that's what you do in your practice. You know, I've heard recently that a great employee can replace 3 good employees, and so it's really important to be able to have to understand your people and hire the right ones and maximize their value. So, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into this line of work.
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity. I've been a consultant more than I have inside companies. However, I started out at a consultancy here in town, a boutique company. It's been since gobbled up by IBM, but it was called Batres Hallweg, and we did management consulting, again, talent management practices across the end-to-end employee life cycle. So I worked as a consultant for 10 years, and then one of my customers asked me to come on board. It was a Fortune 750 company, and the CEO was convinced that organizational development, or talent management, as it's known in many practices, was a key to unlocking the full potential of his company. And he asked me to help him build out the talent practices inside a diversified industrial company, so that we had not only the capacity for today, but could over time incrementally build the capacity to meet the strategic imperatives he had for the future.
Brilliant. A forward thinker, I think.
Yes, one of the many visionaries that are out there today. However, taking a leap of faith like that in a publicly traded company can be a little bit of a risk. Not very many CEOs here in Dallas have done that, but there have been a few. Yes.
Right, right. Well, let's jump right in and start talking about assessments. So first, I'd like to debunk a myth, and I think I hear this frequently in the circles. Well, can you use this? Or is this right? How do we, use these things? Is this legal? Is the use of employee-related assessments in business legal?
Yes, absolutely. And so that myth that it is not legal does need to be debunked. So the Supreme Court ruled in 1971 that not only are assessments legal, but valuable when used appropriately, and recommended for businesses with 15 people or more. So that it was a huge ruling and was based upon a court case between Griggs versus Duke Power Company. And in that, the African American population was not being promoted as equally as the white population. And so they were using testing assessments in order to decide who was promoted and who was not. And so the vote by the Supreme Court was that the test was discriminating against race, even though the company itself did not intend to discriminate. And they were found guilty of discrimination. So there are fair practices that they need to not only not discriminate against the class, race, age, all the things that we know of today, but that it cannot discriminate in equity as well, which they call disparate impact. And disparate impact is something like you pay one amount to females for the same job as the amount for males, which is done in our country, at a exponential rate. However, it is actually discrimination practices of the Fair Employee Commission Act. So I'll stop there because I could get very technical and deep, but I don't think we want to go there.
So even I want to be sure I understand this. The Supreme Court ruled that in fact assessments are legal, but they said that this particular assessment was a problem. Is that what I heard you say?
Exactly. And so in their ruling, stating that they are good practice for business, it's good business practice to use assessments, you do need to be careful in the way that we're using them. And I think we're going to be getting into that further into the podcast.
Yes, for sure. So I know that there are different types of assessments. Can you tell us what are the different types of assessments that are available?
Yeah, there's different categories of assessments. One is the category of work style, and the next is for personality, and then you have cognitive capabilities as well. And so the rationale for these is that job performance is based upon a variety of factors that come together, not only work behaviors, but values, interests, and some cognitive, in some jobs, cognitive or intelligence capacity. So each of these assessments in these categories, so you had mentioned DISC, That falls into the work styles category. You mentioned strengths finders. That's also in the work styles category. When you talk about culture index or predictive index or other assessments in the personality category, such as Hogan and the 16 PF, or also there's other instruments. There's so many instruments out there that fall in those categories. There's also the aptitude category. So think about the SATs, GREs, those are about your potential against your peer group. And that's also used in pre-employment assessments as far as that type of normative scoring, which is also important to understand the types of scoring and what that scoring means and how to interpret that scoring and use it effectively.
Okay, so let me just be sure I understand and follow here. So SAT, GRE, things like that, those would fall into that cognitive.
Into aptitude.
Okay.
Yeah, your capability. You think about it, if you get an SAT score of 1100, the colleges either choose you or do not choose you because they think you can do the work. And so that's comparing your learned ability, your aptitude, learned ability heretofore compared to your peer group.
Okay. All right. So now, and the most common things I think we find in the workforce are going to either be the work style or the personality, and the way you've described the personality ones, like the predictive index and the culture index. Those to me, I lump them in, probably using the words incorrectly, and here you are. You can correct me if I'm wrong in this. I call kind of the personality test the predictive tests, right? These are we going to be a good fit, that kind of thing, and those are tests pre-employment. And work style, I call those productivity assessments. So how do we work better together, right?
Yeah, good way.
Yeah, those are, if I'm right, those are the most commonly used tests. Those two categories for business. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, they're the most common use. There are some cognitive, some intelligence. I wouldn't necessarily call them all intelligence. I call them cognitive because they're about how you reason. It's not your IQ. It's your verbal reasoning or your mathematical reasoning, your business reasoning, strategic reasoning, things like that. Yeah. So those are used, and typically the cognitive's used at the higher level of the organization. So if you're in a publicly traded company that's very large, those come into play at the higher levels. But so you're absolutely right. I think you've categorized them correctly. You've got the work style or the how we are productive together, and then the personality. Those are the most common.
Got it. So under what circumstances should assessments be considered, and what issues are they attempting to resolve?
Yeah. So for me, they're resolving any business issue, right? But what the first question is, what is the business issue you're trying to resolve? Are you trying to get the right people in your company that are good cultural fits? That's a business problem. Are you having excessive turnover? Let's find out why and use assessments. Do you have people accelerating in their professional development at the level that you desire and that's necessary for the changes and acceleration of your company? Are you wanting to improve communication among your team members? Or to your point that you said earlier, the productivity of a team getting together and producing an outcome? Have you identified leaders in your leadership pipeline coming up? And are you continuing to develop them appropriately? Is that one of the business issues? Do you have a gap in your succession planning, that you didn't hire during a downturn? And so you ended up with a higher aged population, no middle folks, and a early career. And how do you bridge that gap when your retirees are starting to exit out? So almost any time you have an issue around people and that it's impacting inefficiencies or the risks of your business, is a time for you to really focus on putting resources towards talent rather and investing in your talent and in your training and your learning and in your development activities, not taking away funding for those areas.
Interesting. I was with a friend who recently sold his business just this week. Recently sold his business to a private equity firm, and one of the things that that they did even before the acquisition was my friend and all of his senior managers were required to do an assessment. I failed to ask which one it was, and now I'm kicking myself because I failed to do that. But it was multiple hours with a industrial psychologist after the assessment, and he said it was liberating. He said now they know how to work with us, we know how to work with them, and so to me, I think that that's super important. But I also point out, even from my own experience, asking employees to take an assessment when they haven't been used in the past can cause some anxiety, I think, right?
Yeah.
I recall when my company was purchased by a publicly traded company years ago, they sent in a team to do assessments on all of the senior executives. And while certainly now I understand that's common practice, it caused an amazing amount of anxiety for me and for the other executives that were to take part in these assessments, and they were actually done mostly via interview, and so I guess my question is then, how can business owners, if they decide that they want to use tests to improve productivity and some of the things that we've talked about here already, how can business owners minimize the anxiety for their employees when they're introducing assessments into their company?
Yeah, it is very anxiety provoking for most people. And I think the very first thing is always start at the top. Always have your executives take the assessments first, so they can then be the supporter of it going down. Now, that's not always possible because sometimes you have a leader inside a company or inside a business and you want to pilot the assessment, right? And so you identify a group or a department that would go through it first rather than the executives. Again, I prefer executives go first. However, not always possible. I think the first thing is never coerce or force someone to take it. Allow people to bow out. That said, you can't have 50% of your folks bow out. But I think giving them the option can sometimes just enable them to feel like they've got control. And that's what a lot of people are concerned about, is control. And they're concerned about how this is going to be used, who sees the information, where is it going to be? Is it going to be used long-term or just short-term? How am I going to be presented through the assessment? Like, what is it going to say about me? Right. And oh my gosh, it might say something negative about me. And I have been trying for years not to have something negative about me. It's amazing to me, people who think that their weaknesses don't shine through. They shine through every day, every day. So, for me, I'm a perfectionist. So I overwork. I go into way too much detail. I'm researching way too much based on the needs of the event. And so, for me, I need to back off, and people see that in me every day. It's not a secret, but I think it's a secret. I think, oh, nobody knows, but they do know. But people are very afraid that now the assessment says it. It says Ginny's a perfectionist. Well, yes, it's going to say that, but everybody sees it. And that's sort of the dichotomy about this. But I think being transparent about the data is very important. Help them understand where it's going to be used, who's going to see it, when it's going to be used. Is it going to be used against me? So, a promotion, could be against me. It could be for me, could make the difference. I say the other thing is always let people know what the information is. Always give them feedback. Always go over the results with them first before you share anything publicly as a team or into the HR group.
Interesting. Now, I like that.
Those are my recommendations. Yeah.
I like that. I mean, all of those things, the assessment that I referred to that caused all of the anxiety for me and for the other executives, they never shared their results with us. Never. It was for, we had a parent company. It was for them, and we never heard another word about it. And that was wildly destructive.
Yes, it breeds mistrust. It breeds mistrust, right? And that's not what you're trying to do in your business. You're trying to have an open, transparent, authentic engagement in your company. And by hiding information like that, it just destroys it instead of building it.
Exactly. And before we take our break here, I just wanted to say a word about perfectionism. You already know that that's one of your things. My sidekick, Kim Benson, wonderful work. We work so well together. And in fact, I can give maybe an example when we're on to a different one of our tests in the coming episodes. I'll give an example of how we understand one another a little bit better as a result of having assessments done. But she also is a perfectionist. And I don't know if you happen to be at Dave Kopp's, great business leader here in Dallas, who spoke at Business Navigators. And he said, perfectionism is like trying to teach a gorilla karate. If you're successful, it will kill you.
Yes.
So fair warning.
Yes.
On the perfectionist
heart attack city is, yes, that's what happens. Yes.
Exactly. All right. Well, so we're up against the break. We're talking with Dr. Ginny Gray. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back in 30 seconds.
Every business will eventually transition, some internally to employees and managers, and some externally to third-party buyers. Mastery Partners equips business owners to maximize business value so they can transition their businesses on their terms using our 4-step process. We start with a snapshot of where your business is today. Then we help you understand where you want to be and design a custom strategy to get you there. Next, we help you execute that strategy with the assistance of our amazing resource network. And ultimately, you'll be able to transition your business on your terms. What are you waiting for? More time? More revenue? If you want to maximize your business value, it takes time. Now is that time. Get started today by checking us out at www.masterypartners.com or email us at info@masterypartners.com to learn more.
We're back with Dr. Ginny Gray, an organizational psychologist, and we're talking about employee assessments and how to use them properly. So once I've decided to use an assessment in my business, Ginny, how long can I use the results of that assessment for decision-making? Is it evergreen?
Yeah, excellent question, Tom, and one that doesn't get asked very often. It will depend on the assessment itself. So you always want to ask the consultant that you're using or investigate by getting the technical manual. And in every technical manual, every assessment will have a technical manual that shows how it was designed, how it was used, the reliability and validity factors, which we'll get to a little bit later. And in there also is administration, how to administer it correctly so that you'll get accurate information. And so in there, it will generally tell you, rule of thumb is because we're human beings and we are constantly changing because of our relationships change, our world changes, stressors change us and make us better. Hopefully, right? We overcome them, we get stronger, better after our hardships. So we're learning, we read books, all of this information comes into us constantly every day, and we change our minds, right? We shift who we are. We always have a base of who we are. But we have other characteristics that and traits that lie on top of that can shift. And so if you're looking at something like a behavioral skills, like a DISC or a Myers-Briggs or a Strengths Finder, it's going to shift a little bit based on how you transition through your life. It's not going to be dramatic. It's not going to be a 180 unless you've had a huge hardship and you learn something totally different. And because of that, everyone around you had to change. In other words, you had to change your wife or husband, you had to change your friends, it just was life changing. But most of us don't have that. We have little changes. Then it's usually every 2 years. On personality, it's every 2 to 5 years. If you're looking at promotions, I would never use data that's over 5 years old. I would much rather err towards the 2 year and have them retake it.
Okay. That is solid advice. So many folks kind of do their own. They don't pay attention. You pointed out something really good here, and that is, I didn't even realize this, the technical manual. I mean, how is this to be used and how to use it? And I guess then the answer is really, it depends on the type of test and the specific test. But I think that is some great advice for people to really understand, how is this being used? So many people will take a test and then they're self-interpreting. There are professionals out there that do this for a living. And we'll talk about that in just a second. But where, if I've decided to start doing assessments, where can I get access to various assessments for my business?
Yeah. Certainly, the standard answer almost everything today is go to the internet. Right. I had a doctor even tell me the other day, gave me a little diagnosis, and I said, well, do you have a pamphlet? And he said, no, go to the internet. So, the internet is sort of the answer for a lot of things. So I would say, certainly check with your colleagues and see what they're doing. But you need to know what business issue you're trying to solve first, right? So if it's team performance, you look for the work styles assessments. If it's anything to do with employment, promotion, succession planning, you use the personality or the predictive assessments. Most of the assessments are required for you to have some sort of certification to give them and interpret them. There are categories of assessments. There's an A, B, C, and an M. And so I'm just going to cover A and B. The A's are, you don't have to have any certification at all. You pick it up on the internet, you learn it yourself, and you give it. And that's the Strengths Finders. That falls in that A category. You just have self-study. And as you build capability and you personally feel like you can do this effectively because of your experience, then that's fine. When you go into the DISC, a DISC is under the B. All the rest that we've been talking about today are under the category B. Category B assumes a bachelor's degree in psychology, occupational, career occupations or physical occupations, or education. Did I say that? Psychology, education, or a occupational therapist type of role, those bachelor's degrees, or a certification. So many of these, like DISC, Myers-Briggs, offer certifications, and people go to get certified. They learn about it. They've read the technical manual. They understand the uses and the limitations, and they understand how to interpret it. And so they are allowed to do it. Then we get into category C, and then you have to have master's level and PhD level certifications. Most of those are not used in businesses today. Occasionally they are, but most are not. So category A and B, it will serve us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
Always ask if the person is certified. That is one of the things you want to ask your consultant. Are they certified?
right. Well, let's ask that. I mean, what questions? Let's say that we've decided to do an assessment and we're researching these. What kind of questions should we ask our vendor or consultant when using? When attempting to identify which assessment to use? What are the questions we should be asking?
Yeah, so I think
And be careful because if someone calls you, they're going to be asking these questions, right?
I know. So I'm gonna have to be ready for it. Yeah. So some of this is a little repetitive, but I would say to ask the consultant, I would say, which one are you certified in, or ones? And hopefully they're certified in at least 2 or 3, because then you have options, right? So if the person is only certified in the DISC or Myers-Briggs, that's fine. We can only use it for team building and performance enhancement. If they're not certified in any of the predictives like Culture Index or Performance Index or Hogan, then they can't help you with solving the problem of getting the right people in the door and screening. So you can't use DISC and Myers-Briggs to screen people for jobs because they don't predict performance. They may predict a behavior, but they don't predict how you're going to perform on a job and if you can perform on a job.
That's excellent. So many people use those for that type of assessment. So keep going. What other things?
Yeah. So the next is the audience. Who's the audience? What was it? Who did they use as their background to develop this assessment? We all, as organizational psychologists, have to get a group of people to take these things in order to get them ready, right? So there are, in our next question, I'm going to talk about all the different organizations that are involved in how to design assessments. So there's standards, right, that you have to follow. Mm-hmm. And so they use audiences. So every test vendor uses an audience. They have a theory of performance. They've tested out their theory of performance on organizations over time. And so you want to understand what audience. Was it a manufacturing audience? Was it retail? Was it healthcare? Was it accounting? Where did they do their studies? Did they do a broad audience so that it doesn't matter? So, for example, one of the assessments I used had a broad audience, and so I could use it across the organization freely. Over time, they decided they were going in a different direction. So they changed the audience in which they got their predictive outcomes to retail and customer service. Well, I was in manufacturing, so I could no longer feel comfortable that the results were going to work in my setting. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
So when they built, which the questions are, what is the reliability and validity? When they built it, the reliability, which is the consistency over time, that I'll get the same result over time. So when I take that test on January 1st, and then I take it again in June, it's the same result, right? It's a short period of time, even 3 months, 6 weeks, same result. In a longer period of time, as I said, it's not necessarily going to do that because we change, we're flexible. But the reliability should be a factor. It should be a factor number, and that number needs to be 0.7 or above. In other words, 70% of the time we get the exact same results.
Wow.
And then you want to ask about validity, which is in the predictives. The work styles do not have validity. They might have face validity. It looks good. It sounds good. I can relate to it. Generally, it has a content validity. In other words, it's not asking math questions when it's asking me, when it should be asking me about a job or skills related to a job. And now if math is skill, then great, I should be tested on it. But if math is not the skill, then there's no reason to test me on it. So it's the validity, what's the validity of these things as well. And they usually, again, should be 0.7 or above. So that's the standard measuring stick.
Should a business consider using multiple different assessments, vendors, things like that?
Yeah.
No.
Absolutely. And so let me give you an example of me and my experiences is that each one of these assessments has a theory. So if you look in the technical manual, it'll tell you what the designer was thinking and what they hypothesized is happening. So they typically observed something and they went, I see a theme. Now I'm going to test out that theme. Yes, I see it's testing out. Now I'm going to build an instrument like a DISC, a Myers-Briggs, to verify it so that I can measure it among people and discriminate among people. Well, so Myers-Briggs came at it with a theory. DISC has a theory. These are different psychological theories. Hogan has a different theory. Culture Index has a different theory. So it's almost like personalities. It's almost like each instrument has its own personality. So when you only use one instrument, you only get one theory of personality. May not be sufficient. So for me, I used a battery. I pulled in multiple instruments. So I used the Hogan, I used the DISC, I used, and not always for the same business need, right? But I built a whole category together so that I had a battery, it's called a battery, that I could rely on, and I could look at 5 different assessments. So I could measure you, Tom, on 5 different assessments and look at you and find the themes that run across those.
Interesting.
And not confuse you, right? And not confuse you, but to bring it together into a cohesive understanding of you and help you in your career and help you navigate the organization and help you navigate the business challenges that you're facing. So that's the value of multiple assessments. You can solve different business problems in different ways, and you can look at people through different theories.
I love that because that's a great setup for this over the coming weeks. The various assessments that we've got folks coming on to talk about. These are all certified folks for these different assessments. I'm the guinea pig. So I've taken all of these assessments and we'll get to hear the results over the next couple of weeks as we talk through it, because I wanted to have a real life example. And hurtful and all, they're going to hurt my feelings, I feel certain, but but we'll see how that goes. Are there some risks that we should look out for as a business owner that are associated with using assessments? I know we talked about the legal risk before, which we debunked that myth, but are there some other risks that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, there are. The use risk is probably one of the biggest ones. Are you using it for the right purpose? I don't want to go into too much detail, but I want to get a high level idea of the kinds of issues that have been mitigated already for you. So for example, if you've been using a popular instrument, that a lot of companies use, the probability is pretty high that they have adhered to the principles of appropriate assessment design and delivery. And so there's guidelines. So the US Labor Department, for example, has a document called Testing and Assessments, an employer's guide to good practices. And those state the measures that are important, like the reliability measures and the validity measures that a test vendor needs to prove to you in the technical manual, provide to you, making sure it's fair, that it does not treat different segments of the population in a discriminatory fashion. So the EEOC has which is the, I always mess up that acronym.
But Equal Employment Opportunities Commission.
Right, exactly. Thank you. And they also have a uniform employee selection guideline. And that can be found online. All of these can be found on the American Educational Research Association and the American Psychology Association has guidelines and evaluation documents. So they all focus on what is the appropriate way, how to design them. So they're sort of like a teaching method. So if I wanted to design assessment because I have a theory about what I think is important to look at in the business world, I would have to follow the guidelines in all of these documents. But the bottom line, again, is if it's a popular tool that's already out there in the market, it's probably already overcome these. But you always want to check that, the reliability and validity, and have they followed these guidelines.
That's awesome. Hey, before we run out of time, I want to give an opportunity to let's have a shameless plug for your business. So what sets you apart from other organizational psychologists?
Well, you already know I'm a perfectionist, but, I'm also very creative, which doesn't always come in the same package. So I love solving business problems, and I love taking some of the best practices and shifting them and molding them and recrafting them in a way that makes sense for a business and what a business is trying to accomplish, and that it fits into their culture and their values. And so I really enjoy that process of connecting that all together. So and I get excited. You can always see me get excited about it right now. That's what excites me about being in this business.
That's awesome. Well, one last business question here. This podcast, of course, is all about maximizing business value. Ginny, what is the one most important thing you would recommend business owners do to build value in their business?
Make investing in talent your strategic imperative. The analogy here is, it's location, location, location. It's talent, talent, talent. So if you think about this, you're a business and you have a vision and a mission of what you want to accomplish. That's Mount Kilimanjaro right there in front of you. Are you going to hire Serpies to get you there who have never done this trek before? Or are you going to get people who are knowledgeable, experienced, have an ability to intuitively and potential to get you to reach the top? Are you going to get in physical condition to reach the top? Or are you just going to go from your everyday activities to try and claim the mountaintop? You're not. And so it's the same thing. It's an investment of time, of energy, of money, of practice to attain your goals. So invest, invest, invest in talent.
I love that. And great analogy too, by the way. You can't do that without really practicing and getting in good shape. So I have to ask our bonus question. I always ask this of our folks that join our podcast, and people listen just to hear the answer to this question. So Ginny, what personality trait has gotten you into the most trouble through the years?
It has not been my perfectionism. People love perfectionism because I overdo for others. However, my independence has gotten me in trouble if I'm being very authentic. I'm very strategic and I can see the future and I understand quickly what needs to be done to get there. And sometimes I have to slow down and bring others along and remember that it is a journey with others. I can't get it done alone. And I know I can't get it done alone. But I do have to be mindful of where everybody else is in their thinking and in their belief system and their value system and in their potential. And we all have to work together.
I love it. I love it. I am accused of being a little bit independent myself every now and then. So
yeah, you need, like you said earlier, you need feedback, right? And so the only way to get it is have somebody else in front of you.
That's it. That's it. How can our viewers and listeners get in touch with you?
Oh, certainly. Please look me up on LinkedIn. It's Ginny, Ginny, Gray, Gray, PhD. That's my LinkedIn. And then my phone number, I'll go ahead and give it to your users, is a great way to get a hold of me. And I will answer the phone, or you can leave me a voicemail, 214-734-7177.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. I've put my cell phone right on our website as well. So thank you, Ginny, for being our guest today and educating us as we kick off this great series on assessments.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed being here, Tom, and hopefully it has benefited your listeners.
Absolutely. I'm reeling in all the new information that I even have here. So you can find Dr. Ginny Gray on LinkedIn. Of course, you can always reach out to me and I will be happy to make a warm introduction. Next week, we'll start exploring individual assessments in depth, and you're going to learn a lot about me in the coming weeks. So don't miss that. This is the Maximize Business Value podcast, where we give practical advice to business owners on how to build long-term sustainable value in your business. Be sure to tune in each week and follow us wherever you found this podcast, and give us a comment or a suggestion for a future podcast or another series that you'd like to hear. So until next time, I'm Tom Bronson, reminding you to use assessments wisely while you maximize business value.
Thank you for tuning into the Maximize Business Value podcast with Tom Bronson. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition on their terms. Learn more on how to build long-term sustainable business value and get free value-building tools by visiting our website, www.masterypartners.com. That's master with a Y, masterypartners.com. Check it out.
That was perfect. I wouldn't make any changes on that.